right. Hi, everybody. How are you? So our panel is kind of getting to the thick of some of the use cases.
Right.
So we've started the morning with a lot of promise for change. And tokenization is one of those use cases where we're now into the interesting and also complicated nitty-gritty of how do we make change sustainable and lasting and compliant and adopted by different types of stakeholders. So joining me on stage, I have Miguel, Angie, and Guillaume, who are experts on this topic. So we'll go through the promise and the peril and the opportunities and the obstacles of the whole tokenization game in all its permutations over the next half an hour or so. Let me start with some introductions. May I ask maybe, Angie, we'll start with you, introduce your role and the link to the tokenization agenda.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Angie Walker. I run banking capital markets for Chainlink Labs. I've been at Chainlink Labs just under a year, about 10 months, and we look after all aspects of interoperability, plus data oracles, plus things like proof of reserve and synchronization cross-chain. So very excited to be here with you and looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Angie. Miguel?
I'm Miguel Diaz. I am with the Bank for International Settlements. Within the bank, we have a technology branch called the Innovation Hub, and we touch some of these topics quite often. And before that, I was with the Central Bank of Mexico, managing financial market infrastructures.
Guillaume?
Yeah, so hi. So my name is Guillaume de la Tour. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I built 7 startups in US and in Europe. And I was employed as digital officer for the group Agricole. So Agricole is the largest financial institutions in Europe with 80 banks, with one big asset manager called Amundi, with a lot of insurance companies and stuff like that. And I manage also a big part of the digital stuff for the group.
Thanks, Guillaume. And maybe I should say that my job and my perspective is, so I work in political intelligence in Brussels and in London, so I do have a little bit of maybe Eurocentric view of the world at the minute. And what we do is work out where the political and the regulatory frictions in adopting technological change. So that's the perspective from which I'm coming in. But let me start by asking my panel the question on our headline. What does tokenization matter for? Maybe Miguel, I start with you.
So let me start with the basics, which is that I think everyone realized that the representation of financial or real asset claims through cryptographic means can be quite efficient. But besides that efficiency on that particular representation, I think the most powerful part of this tokenization element is the actual trigger effect that it has had on the creation of several other products on top of that. And you can see this happening, of course, in the decentralized world, or all the smart contracts and all the DeFi developments that we have seen. But I think even more importantly is how this has pushed the traditional institutions to do something else. So if you see large financial institutions, if you see financial market infrastructures, and if you see even regulators, central banks, how they have reacted to this representation of assets in the digital world, this has been quite powerful. And it has generated different ways of seeing the world, including challenges to the traditional way in which we see regulation, traditional way in which we see settlement, and so on. And I think this can lead to very powerful solutions, probably not just in the token world, but in the financial system overall.
Thanks, Miguel. Angie, what's your perspective?
I'm going to bucket it into 2 areas. Sorry to make sweeping generalizations, but certainly at Chainlink, what we're seeing in the regulated part of the market is we're seeing 2 things. One is within existing asset classes, the use of tokenization or tokenization or digital representation of certain asset types. It allows us to mobilize them and leverage them in a different way. And a good example of that is collateral, which I think will be huge. And what we're seeing is digital representations, typically like digital collateral receipts, that represent the underlying assets lodged with custodians or CSDs, and then giving us the ability to move that collateral instantaneously between regulated market participants. That's a good example of how we're using it in the asset area within traditional instruments to leverage them more effectively intraday and instantaneously. On the currency side, we're certainly seeing a big uptake within Chainlink's client base of regulated stablecoins, so tokenizing typically fiat-backed or fiat and high-quality liquid asset-backed stablecoins, and then using those to facilitate things like cross-border payments, remittance advice. Obviously, that's limited to jurisdictions in which the regulatory landscape is accepting of that use, but certainly on the currency side. And then in the new world of real-world assets, we're seeing some really interesting asset classes that we're bringing in from, we have a huge Web3 community. Chainlink powers most of Web3, as you know, and we're seeing some really amazing assets coming into regulated markets from outside in DeFi, including things like real estate, infrastructure, private equity. So it widens the remit to a much broader spectrum of assets for investment purposes. And by fractionalizing, we can democratize very large in scale, esoteric assets and make them more broadly available. So it's very interesting both in the existing asset classes and in the new asset classes and the way we can leverage them and bring them into play within regulated markets.
Okay. So I would say collateral, payments, and illiquid assets.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
How does that square off with your perspective, Guillaume?
So I'm going to take it on a broader side.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you a bank perspective. I do believe that what tokenization matters for the most for individual citizen, European citizen or US citizen, they don't give a shit. It's not important for them, okay? They don't give a shit. Let's speak it clearly. But for banks, for financial institutions, this is crucial. Why? Because remember, every companies in the world, in every financial institution still have cobbled, big old systems, cobbled, not real time, with cutoff times, with a lot of issue. This costs us fortunes to pay IBM to maintain those systems. This is an extortion, okay? But we need to continue because all our systems is based on that. So what does tokenization matter? It matters for us because this is a unique opportunity to modernize our system, to go to real time, to go to quicker systems, faster, something better than that we have today. Because the main issue that we have today is real time, cut-off time. You know that because today, individual citizens think that, oh, my banking is real time. No, 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 we fake it. We make you believe that it's real time. It is not. All the settlement, the banking account is done at the end of the day and not in real time, first of all. And second, during the weekend, same thing, it's cut. Yeah. So that's going to be a huge issue in the future if we don't take the train, okay?
I agree completely, but with one slight difference that I think that the user in the end doesn't really care. They just care about the functionality, right? Yeah. They care about having the financial asset and being able to move it from here to there. And they don't really care about the technology. And what you mentioned about the legacy problems in the banks, I think is fundamental. Now, tokens, I think, generated the trigger so that new technologies can be explored. And tokenization is one way, but then you can see some other implementations in other types of technology. And I think when you see and dig deeper in different jurisdictions what is going on, some are exploring one way, some are exploring the other. And I think the challenge is how to start making them interact with each other so that if you are based on a token solution and the other is based on a CSD with some 24/7 technology that can allow for the financial market infrastructure to operate, how we can merge these two together and allow for the individual to actually transfer the asset that they want to transfer, no?
But yeah, absolutely. And I've read a lot of documents from BIS, and I know you are fully aligned with me on that subject. people don't care so much, in fact, about tokenization, so what we were speaking about. They just want their money to be well served, and they can take it whenever they want and spend it however they want, okay? If they want to pay a beer, good for them, okay? No worries. You need to be open 24/7. If they want to send money from one country to another in real time, they want to be sure that the nephew they're sending money to has it immediately, okay? This is what you're doing, and what Chainlink is doing too. But for us, it is critical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, indeed, we often say this, right? The sign of technological adoption is that when people get the service and they don't care about the underlying tech, right? Unless you are the people that are developing the products and the people whose job is to know the tech. But let me ask you this, both of you gentlemen, in the communities that you represent, banking and central banking, for purposes of this argument, how bought in are your stakeholders on the tokenization journey, right? So in a room like this, most people understand it's a self-selection choice. They're here because they care about the tokenization journey. Maybe let's start with the banking sector. Is this the blockchain use case that not only kind of few stellar institutions or digital offices of the banks, but the whole sector you think would embrace in a, I don't know, 3 to 5 year journey?
So I think, okay, I'm speaking just for myself, okay? For financial, Agricole is a large financial institutions, so the top management and overseeing the stakeholders, they don't understand a lot about all those things, okay? Because it's a large, tokenization is a very small part of the subject, okay? But there is a lot of other subjects, with regulations, with digital euro. I don't know if we're going to have time to speak about that, about who is a CBDC. And we have worked on those subjects, and Stellar help us. I see Erin is here. Thank you, Stellar, for helping us on this subject. So there is a lot of subjects, and so that we're working on, and not only on technology. Technology is a part of the puzzle. Don't forget that every time on financial institutions, every time you're moving up one step on technology, you need to move 2 steps on regulations, compliance, every laws stuff and everything, because that's quite important for us. We're under-regulated. We're very regulated, and not under.
We'll talk about regulation in a minute, but Miguel.
So I think more than sold on a particular way of solving the problems, we're focused on solving them. And for that, you need to understand all the different potential technologies that can provide the functionality for the final user. Just as I mentioned before, this is not about whether I do it or I get the instant settlement or I get the cross-border settlement through technology A or B, but that it should be done, and that the individual should even don't notice this. So we have to be like the plumbers in the financial system, and we have to figure ways in which we can allow for different implementations of different technologies to interact with each other. So what I see in different central banks is that they are exploring different ways of providing this type of functionality, and not just from the technical perspective, but also from the policy perspective. What elements do we have to develop in order to allow for a cross-border settlement to actually work? Because this is not just about the cryptographic element that can allow us to know who's the owner of a particular cryptographic signature. We actually need to know how this goes back into the legal system and allows me to claim my liability or my asset within the existing legal system. So these type of questions are much deeper than just the technology, and I could not say that the central banking community is into tokens or providing the solution through tokens. The central banking community is into providing solutions, and tokens are one part of that solution. Is this the full silver bullet that will solve all the problems? I don't think so. It might help us with providing certain functionalities in a more efficient way than other technologies have in the past. But we have to explore all the different technologies, and this is what we're trying to do.
Just a quick follow-up question. How do you deal, because the BIS Innovation Hub has this kind of awesome responsibility to think forward, right? You're free to think, to explore. How do you appease your central banking community when they're worried about technology risk?
Well, you don't know technology risk until you play with the technology, right? So, and this is just the first part. So the technology risk, when you talk about cryptography and you talk about post-quantum and these things, there are technological responses to that, which is very clear. What starts getting complicated is when you see the big picture and you start getting the legal risks and you start getting the cross-border risks and you start getting the counterparty risk, even with a cryptographic element having no risk from the technological perspective. So the idea of the experiments within the Innovation Hub is to go deeper and use these technologies to start getting these little things that would not come up just from a diagram, and play with that and identify these risks and try to mitigate them as good as possible. So that's a little bit how we try to deal with it.
Okay. And a similar question to you. So when you're pulling together the tokenization experiments or across the asset classes that you mentioned or other, how do you kind of bring the stakeholders to the table so that you build trust in the system?
Yes, it's a really interesting question. We spend as much time at Chainlink gluing blockchains to existing infrastructure as we do gluing blockchains to each other. So I think this whole idea that blockchain will replace existing infrastructure is not really appropriate, because there's 50 years of infrastructure that we've invested in as an industry. So most of the projects I work on are driven either by organisations like BIS, MAS with Guardian. We've done a lot of work with MAS with Guardian. We're involved in quite a few of the Guardian initiatives. Doing work with IADB, DREX on the DREX program as well in LATAM. So we're really bringing market participants together as part of a group that are collaborating. Same with Swift, done a lot of work with Swift on their DVP program. So it's really about linking assets, moving assets cross-chain, moving instructions between existing infrastructures, and we tend to base it around a use case. So a lot of the Guardian use cases are defined at the highest levels, like transfer agency, DVP, cross-border payments, and we'll coalesce around a group of users, provide a test infrastructure within Chainlink and allow or help facilitate them to provide a test infrastructure on which they can demonstrate the use case, demonstrate the operate model. But very often it does involve integration into existing infrastructures. So that for me is as important, and the provision of data, so not just about tokenizing, but being able to continue to populate the smart contract, to drive the smart contract, to drive actions and events, to update the data that's in the smart contract, irrespective of what chain that asset exists on. So it's about how we seamlessly integrate chains and allow assets to flow seamlessly and frictionlessly between blockchain infrastructure and existing heritage infrastructures that are very important and aren't going to disappear. So FMIs, particularly CSDs, we're doing a lot of work in the central bank space, joining central banks together, both for data and for transactions and cross-chain, working with the large organizations that are driving innovation. This is all really important part of discovery, and we are now starting to see some of these programs go into production. So it's a really exciting point in the journey for both data and assets.
That was actually going to be my follow-up question to you, if you allow me more. What is the path that you see from the experiment land into the production land? And let's say this with a bit of context. So the EU tried to launch this tokenization sandbox called the DOT pilot, and no one wants to apply. Right, so there's like 10 applications. It's been an year in the making, and it's a live conversations in Brussels. Like, is this experimentation space dead or dying? Because the path to production from the space, one of the reasons is that the path to production was very difficult to see. So in whether it's the Guardian experiments or others that you participate in, how do you handle that risk?
So I think it depends on what the experiment is. Some of these experiments are a precursor to production. So one of the partners that one of the projects we're working on for Guardian is issuance of money market instruments into production as a tokenized asset, effectively using a commercial bank and an exchange infrastructure. And that has a path directly into production. One or two of the projects we're working on, particularly around things like a digital transfer agency, asset servicing, corporate actions. At the moment, we're experimenting. So in the corporate action space, we've just finished a big project which is being reported on in the next few days around corporate actions, how we facilitated the use of AI and blockchain to facilitate unified golden records and disseminate them. Now, at the moment, that's in a sort of proof of concept phase. We worked with Swift and Euroclear and 10 market participants. But the results of that were very promising, and this is just phase one. So there is absolutely the momentum there for us to continue that journey as a group of equals, in order to drive that towards some sort of production-grade service offering. Who will deliver it and how it's operated and governed, I don't know. At the moment, we're just trying to validate the use of technologies for distribution of data, for the normalization of unstructured data, and then how we can use the ledgers of the individual consumers to disseminate that golden record so everybody sees the same version of the truth. So I think it depends on what the project is, but I would say that the work that people like BIS and MAS do, and these industry initiatives, IADB, who we're working with in LATAM on the central bank project, these are all really important, because even if they're not destined for production initially, production-grade services will eventually evolve off the back of them, but they do prove the use cases and the operating models. That's why we're very heavily involved in a lot of them. So.
Point well taken. I promised to talk about regulation. I know you're all thrilled, so let's talk about that now. But let me say to the audience, I have 4 more minutes of my own questions, and then I'll open to audience Q&A. Somebody will be around with a mic, so think of a question or two. Reg risk, Guillaume, you said absolutely crucial. Regulation should go 2 steps when technology moves 1 step. What are the hurdles that you are facing? What laws need to be changed in the jurisdictions where you operate in order for tokenization to lift off?
So I will say 2 points. First point, ECB. I don't know so much about UK regulations.
Okay.
Sorry for that. Okay, I'm French. Okay, and I lived for quite a while in the States, but never in London. So I don't know.
I think it's quite an international audience, so you're
but
forgiven.
European regulations did a lot. Okay, and so we have everything now. Maybe we're going to have MiCA 2 one day or another to solve the little issues that MiCA has created. But with MiFID and MiCA, we have everything. US has to do his homework too. But on regulations, we're good, in Europe at least. Now, the job is to be to companies like yours, like Stellar, like others, to come to us as financial institutions with homework done, okay? That you need to prove that you have talked to the regulators, that your system is fully compliant, that we believe in you, which is important, okay? Because at the end, we have the bank account of millions of guys. I don't know what you think, Miguel.
Yeah, so regulation is a huge challenge around the world. So the regulatory frameworks and even the legislative frameworks were developed for a different world in which everything went through some trusted entities, and through these trusted entities, you could just apply regulation to the trusted entities, and they did basically everything. A good example of this is payments, a simple payment. 25 years ago, a payment was done completely by 2 institutions, the issuing bank and the recipient bank. And now, a payment can be composed out of 10 or 12 institutions participating in the middle, from account validation, the cryptogram validation, like several pieces in which you can separate a payment. If you take the regulatory framework as is and try to apply the regulations that were created for a bank or for a payment provider 25 years ago, and you apply it now, you kill these little ones. But if you don't apply anything, you get a lot of risk for the users. So this is a very significant conundrum, and the same happens with most technological advancements. Things are starting to atomize into different pieces, and then the regulation has to come up with ways in which you can mitigate the risks of each of these little steps. That takes, so evolving this regulation took 5-6 decades, right, of trial and error, and we came up with something that is kind of safe for the public.
I think 5-6
regulating,
decades.
Well, even more than that, for the regulation, for the banks, the prudential regulations, and so on.
I think that's going to be quicker than
a long
that.
time. Pardon me?
I think that's going to be quicker than that.
No. I mean, it took us six decades to come to this place. So it has a lot of work into it. And developing the complete framework again for this atomized solution might take, of course, not 6 decades, but it is a huge task.
Yeah.
And the regulators are very overwhelmed with the change, and they have to see all these regulations. So this is a huge task. I believe that the European perspective of this function-based approach is the way to go. But applying this in different jurisdictions, especially in the smaller jurisdictions, is very difficult because it requires lots of resources to just understand the risks of every one of these little pieces. So this is a big challenge going into the future, especially for the smaller jurisdictions.
So would it be fair to understand what you're saying by, so in payments, for example, we moved into, in banking as well, we moved to activity-based legislation, and that opened up the competitive space. Could something like this take place in the pre- and post-trading space?
Well, it sounds reasonable, right? What you want to do from the regulatory perspective is to mitigate the risks so that people can use financial services from a secure perspective, right? If you think about deposit taking, what you want is that the person taking the deposits can actually bring back your money whenever you want it. And the same goes for every other piece of the financial service that you want to atomize. So in principle, that's theoretically what should be done to open this up and just mitigate the risks of the particular activities. But this is a huge task. And the regulatory bodies are not that large in order to get all these things right.
I see two business opportunities here. First business opportunity is who's going to be the engine? Is it going to be Stellar? Who's going to be the engine who manage all this transfer money and stuff like that? I don't believe that's going to be only one. I think it's going to be a combination of many. Okay. First thing, maybe Chainlink. Combination of many. Second business opportunity is the cash. How do you transfer? Who is going to be the money cash system? Okay, the token cash system is going to be, I don't know if guys from Société Générale here are there, no. Are they going to be Société Générale token? Is it going to be Circle, USDC or EuroC? Is it going to be whatever, digital euro? We don't know yet. We're going to see. But
well, it depends on the use case, right? I mean, there are stable coins emerging everywhere.
We need a stable coin. And we need an official, regulated, absolutely controlled stablecoin that we control. Not we control, but the financial institution control.
So can I just, sign up before you come? Two things. First of all, you can also send questions through Slido. There's a QR behind me. Or you can just shout and put your hand up. But second, on your question, are you agnostic to the answer to your own question about the cash leg?
I do, but I don't think my boss agnostic.
Just touching on one point that is very important and that we believe is of the essence for the financial system. The singleness of money is very important for systems to operate properly and for some settlement asset to be actually efficient at the settlement purposes. And this is what has been evolved upon time and again all around the world, the singleness of money within particular jurisdictions. And this singleness of money, in most of the cases, all of the cases, is granted by a central issuing authority of the cash element or the high-powered money. And this is where central banks take place. The provision, for example, of a stable coin or deposits, what we call M1 in economics, is just like a secondary money that emerges out of this basic high-powered money, which is central bank money. And we believe that this is still the way forward. This has been the product of the evolution of financial markets all around the world, and we believe that this is the case right now too. The technology has not changed that fundamental element.
So where does that lead us? Does that mean that wholesale CBDC, retail CBDC needs to take place for tokenization to take off? Or might the BIS become a little bit friendlier to private stablecoins?
So the thing is, the two-tiered system that we have in the financial markets right now, with high-powered money and then commercial bank money, has proved a very efficient way going forward. Now, the question in different jurisdictions is whether the high-powered money should also be in the hands of the individuals, which implies thinking about retail CBDC so that individuals can use that high-powered money or N0 in their economic transactions day to day. So that is the fundamental question. The private sector, of course, comes in very significantly in providing commercial entity money. And for that, we need some regulation to make sure that whatever commercial entity money we're using is actually valuable in the end when we want to cash this out.
So there's a lot of regulated stablecoins emerging in the jurisdictions where the regs allow it to occur.
Yep.
And we use proof of reserve to monitor the underlying assets that back those stablecoins. That use case is growing really quickly. And you see an ever-growing number of regulated stablecoins emerging for things like cross-border remittance payments. It depends on, obviously, the regs within that jurisdiction. But it is, the commercial bank use of digital currency is already well advanced and moving quickly. So I think CDBC will follow behind, but obviously once we get both, as you say, it's a two-tiered system. And if we can move that frictionlessly from an issuer through to the beneficiary, that's really important in a safe and transparent way.
Quite right, and we see that difference in Europe. Just for the 3-4 months since we can have regulated stablecoins, there's 6 new applications or 6 new approved applications for stablecoins. I'm at time, but I will abuse my privilege and take an audience question.
You said about, you mentioned something very important, the smart contract. I said hello from Switzerland, Joseph. Smart contract and tokenization. Can you develop on that? Because we didn't, not really.
Do you mean the conditions of a smart contract as it moves on-chain or cross-chain?
Yeah, I mean, is this something important?
It's really important. So can I answer that question? So people think if you tokenize an asset that the job is done, but it's not done because the minute the asset is fractionalized and moves to other chains, if the smart contract doesn't go with the asset on its journey, then the asset effectively becomes stale. I mean, it only becomes a representation of the thing that occurred at the point of tokenization. What we spent a lot of time doing in the very early days at Chainlink is making sure the smart contract remains, and I'm not technical, so forgive my terminology, wrapped around the asset so that as the asset traverses different chains during its life cycle, think about EU pilot regime and DSS, where we're collapsing an MTF and a CSD into a single life cycle, then what we can do is drive actions and events. We can update the content of the smart contract as it moves from chain to chain, and that's really important. It's no good just tokenizing something if you can't maintain the link between the token and the smart contract that represents its own actions and obligations. Otherwise, the asset in its value is effectively diluted. So that linking and maintaining of what we call them programmable token transfers is really important. It took a long time to develop that, but that will allow us to manage and automate a lot of the actions and the events in areas like post-trade for securities, for example.
Fair. I'm afraid that's all the time we have. And before they kick me out of the stage, let me thank my panel, Angie, Guillaume, Miguel. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.